There comes a moment in time when human behavior is capable of the most ferocious and irrational activity. This capacity to go berserk, to have no semblance of feeling for the human condition at all. Apparently it lies in us. Apparently it lies in human behavior. I don't know what is so crazed as to trigger it, but it's there.
So, where exactly did the roots of this genocide spawn from? Looking back to 1916, when Belgian forces took control over Rwanda, they used racist, pseudoscientific methods. With authorities dividing people in Rwanda, they created a hierarchy within the population. Education and opportunities were limited to the Tutsi only, and the Hutu quickly became the impoverished majority. By the 1930s, identity cards that would later be used to slaughter Tutsi in 1994 were implemented, further creating division between the Hutu and Tutsi. In the 1960s, a Hutu individual came into presidency, leading to independence for Rwanda. Tutsi rebels at the time tried to overthrow President Kayibanda in 1963. In response, he declared them as cockroaches, and 20,000 Tutsi were killed, with 300,000 fleeing the country. The power of balance quickly shifted, and it was now a small Tutsi majority who saw increased marginalization. The late 1980s saw the formation of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, created by exiled Tutsi residing in Uganda. The RPF moved forward on October 1st of 1990, again launching an attack on the Hutu president known as Habyarimana. This would spark a civil war and the creation of the Interahamwe militia. This civil war piqued interest within the United Nations, and on August 4, 1993, Habyarimana and the RPF signed the Arusha Accords in Tanzania, which ratified the end of the civil war and promised a safe return for refugees, along with the creation of a transitional government under UN supervision. But don't be fooled. Neither party was happy, and the end of this civil war was only the dawn of the genocide that was about to take place. This following timeline of important dates breaks down the genocide. It was on April 6, 1994, when a plane carrying President Habyarimana was shot down over Kigali. Immediately, the violence that was already happening amplified, and with many blaming the Tutsi for this event, the Presidential Guards launched a retaliation against opposition leaders, moderate Hutu, and the Tutsi population. April 7th marks the start of the mass killings and the UN's decision to avoid engagement, affirming their perspective to avoid conflict despite the action that peacekeepers like Dallaire were urging for. 800,000 deaths were about to occur. Some of these terrible mass killings are represented in the following. The Prime Minister Madame Agatha House getting stormed on April 7th, resulting in her death, along with 10 UN Belgian peacekeepers. This would also be the day that Belgium withdraws majority of its troops. Americans were then made to evacuate, embassies were closed, and the civil population was beginning to be stranded. On April 15th, 5,000 Tutsis were killed in a church after Hutu extremists lured them in with a false sense of safety. These account for only some of the prominent killings out of the hundreds of thousands that occurred. It was on April 21st that a Rwandan spokesperson named Monique is smuggled into the US, where she begs for help. Yet, the government looked the other way, and instead, 90% of peacekeepers got withdrawn, leaving millions in danger with only 450 men remaining. It wasn't until 5 weeks in, on May 15th, after hundreds of thousands of deaths, where America finally allows for 500 more peacekeepers. Yet, none of them are made readily available. It's on May 25th where President Clinton affirms the Americans' ideal during this time, which was characterized by a lack of response and action to favor the public eye over in America. Finally, on July 4, 1994, the RPF seized control of the Rwandan capital, Kigali, and the Hutu army retreated to a secure zone established by the French. 2 million Hutu fled to Zaire and Tanzania, and this day was officially considered the end of the genocide. At the international level, on the November 8, 1994, the Security Council set up the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, where high-ranking military and government officials, politicians, businessmen, militia, and media leaders were indicted. The court also convicted the Prime Minister during the genocide, Jean Kambanda, to life in prison. Widespread public participation in the Rwandan genocide made it difficult to prosecute those who were guilty. However, more than 100,000 individuals were imprisoned in the years following the genocide. Rwandan authorities also set up Gacaca courts, community-based tribunal systems that were centered around public confession, although many defendants in Gacaca courts have been released provisionally awaiting trial. It was not until 1999 that the UN admitted its failure in preventing the genocide. An independent report, commissioned by UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, denounced the organization for ignoring evidence of a planned genocide, as well as their refusal to intervene when the massacres began, in result abandoning the victims.